Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Kronstadt. I hope all of you had a great Christmas time and a good start in 2018. So for me, it was finally time to bring out the next episode of our little City Skylines series. The reason why there wasn't a video of Kronstadt for this long time is that I have a new microphone, and maybe you hear the difference between the first two videos and this one. And it took me a really long time to put all the things together and to set up my microphone settings and the audio interface. And I had a lot of work to do also, but now this video comes out and I hope to get the next video out in the next week, so stay tuned to that. And now back to this video. Today, we want to go literally downtown by placing the Roadnetwork and detail some iconic areas of the new downtown of Kronstadt. I want to start with telling you a little story that I had in mind when I was placing the street grid and the downtown. With this method, I tried to get a realistic and multi-layer city layout because you imagine first of all what the structures all came from. So here's my little story. While the small city of Kronstadt, we built inside the castle in the first episode, began to rise and rise during the late 18th century, when it became part of the Grand Duchy of Transylvania, and with this of the Habsburg Empire, the houses sprawled in an unordered way to the foot of the castle hill. In 1799, it was Julius von Lamberg, member of the city council, who had the brilliant idea of sending legates to the most innovative cities of this time. Two of them were sent to a young, prosperous city between Rhine and Neckar, Mannheim. Here the Elector of the Palatinate planned his city in a revolutionary way years ago. Instead of narrow and tangled streets, the Dutch architect organized the city in a squared shape, a system he borrowed from ancient Greek and Roman cities. Furthermore, the two legates from Kronstadt couldn't find any street names. All the streets were named after a mathematical coordinate system following an axis of two avenues in the middle of the city, an expression of the new spirit of ratio during this siècle des Lumières. The two legates, whose names we don't know today unfortunately, were heavily impressed and made many notes and drawings. Back in Kronstadt, and after they handed their documents over to the city council, the city fathers decided to take the squared city grid together with the mathematical street names. In the logical and scientific way of infrastructure, they saw the future of city planning. We are now opening the next chapter in our city chronicles, the 19th century. As the most European cities did in this period, Kronstadt decided to delimit the downtown area with a big avenue ring around it. A consequent example for this traffic solution during the era of industrialization is again Mannheim. On this picture in the background you can see the street ring going all around the square downtown. The city planners in Kronstadt followed the riverside with the avenue they called after the Habsburg Empress and the Hungarian Queen Elizabeth. Another part of the ring street is named after Maximilian Renner, an Austrian president in the early 20th century. And no, he wasn't president of the modern Austria, but president of the parliament of the KUK monarchy. As I love the story behind the city, I usually rename all the streets with names I collect walking through German cities. those of you who are living in the southwest of Germany may recognize some or the other street names. Back to what I'm doing right now on the screen. You saw me already adding all those little streets that are not regular in the street grid, in the squared street grid. And also, one interesting thing, the squares aren't all the same. You see there are longer squares than others, and that's because, yeah, it's not in a modern city where all is 100% correct. There are irregularities in the street grid, and speaking about irregularities, you see me here adding those streets after the street grid, and they are following two streets on the riverside and yeah, ending there. And also this little park inside all those streets. now we are adding some streets that are following the older line where the city walls were standing. Maybe you remind the image a few minutes ago. There was a big wall around the squared city, and in the 19th century this wall was removed when the city ring was established, and the street grids were continued, and that's because we have long streets and no grid in this area. Now I'm adding all those one-way streets, and that's also typical for Mannheim. You have inside the squares one-ways, and you go one direction from one end to the other end, and now I'm adding those pedestrian pathways. And yeah, later this avenue will be removed and made to one big pedestrian avenue with tram lines. You will see in a few minutes. So now we are detailing this tram line I was speaking about, this long street. It's German Lange Straße for long street. And here the tram is running through the whole city, and on both sides there are pedestrian pathways. And you can also see the street names. That's one special thing. In real life in Mannheim and also in our fictional story Kronstadt, they have a street name system where not the streets are named, but the blocks the streets are marking. And so the problem is in City Skylines you can't name the blocks, and that's also a real life problem. Every time I'm living in Mannheim, and when people who aren't from Mannheim searching an address or a building, and they have the house number and street number, for example L1, and the navigation systems in the cars, they don't know that the streets aren't named but the blocks, and so the street is named L1, but in fact they are not in L1 but in M1, because the navigation system names the streets. Yeah, and that's one problem. So the only way I could add this naming system in City Skylines was to name the streets with both blocks they are on the both sides. So you can see on the screen we have F1, G1, and that is the street that runs between the block F1 and the block G1. And between two blocks of the same letter, for example F1 and F2, the street is named F1, F2. And it was a real mess to name all the streets, because in City Skylines you have one street name and that runs through the street until this street will end. But in my game I wanted to have the street name for every grid. So I had to delete every single street grid and rebuild it and rename it. So it was very, very long-term work for me. But in the end, the result is we have a consequence system inside our city. So every people who is coming to Kronstadt and they are searching for a building, and that's the cool thing about it. You come to the city and you don't have an idea where is what building. You have such an address, only an address. And so you are standing at M1 and you want to go to L7, you know, I have to go at the end of the squares and then go left. Even you don't know what the building is looking like or something like this, only because of this coordination system. I really like it. Now we skipped a little bit and we find ourselves in this police headquarter. It's located at the southeast of our city, and it's one of 2 or 3 big police stations in our city. And I added 2 times the same building. It's made by Feindbild. I love this asset. It's pretty. It's very, very pretty. And in between, I added those Baroquesque buildings, and yeah, it works pretty nice. And I detailed this yard in between the buildings. And now I'm adding German police signs on every side. And you already saw German police cars coming outside. We have 3 different German police cars in our city. I'm very thankful for those assets. I know our city is located in Austria-Hungary, but yeah, there are no good-looking Austrian police cars, so I decided to take German police cars because there is standing Polizei on it, and yeah, in Austria you also speak German. I'm going crazy with decals around it, and yeah, I tried to make it not as similar. Yeah, I don't want it to be similar everywhere, so I decided to make some cobblestones on those entrances, and around it I took some details on the concrete. So yeah, I really like it in the end, and it's very good looking in my opinion. I think Taser or Press, one of those used this trick to make the very iconic or unique decals and cracks usable again by sinking them down in the ground, and so they are not as bright as they are when you don't sink them to the ground. So with this technique you can create very, very good looking and not repetitive looking areas with concrete. I really like this technique, and I used it quite a lot in the city. So moving forward, what you are seeing right now on the screen, I am now building a roundabout at the northern western part of our city, and this roundabout should manage the traffic that is coming from our small highway interchange you will see in a few minutes. And here in Mannheim you see also a big roundabout at the end of the squared city to manage the traffic and to lead the traffic. So I used a technique. I saw Skibbeth and Hot Kettle using it by placing those lines on the regular lines directly, and then cover it up with ploppable asphalt, so you can add your own street markings to this roundabout or to the streets. And yeah, I made this over to the whole roundabout. Later you will see me also putting some curbs to mark the ways the cars should drive, and also some pedestrian crossings. But I think I will leave you now with the rest of the time lapse, and I will speak a few words later. So enjoy the rest of the time lapse. Now I'm building those on and off ramps, this little interchange as an entrance in our city, in this roundabout. And it might be a little bit short, but I had no more space here, and I think it will be fine with this size. And yeah, there will be some other highway entrances and exits, so citizens aren't allowed to only use this interchange, so they have other interchanges also for entering our highway system. Here I'm forcing this turn-off lane, so traffic is still flowing, and also some detail around it. At this country road, it's our country road, Landstraße, Grondauer Landstraße, and I also add those barriers that pedestrians are secured. But then I realized that, yeah, no pedestrians should be allowed to walk on this side, so I cut those pedestrian paths off this side of the country road, so yeah. Pedestrians aren't allowed to walk there. Now I'm adding a little detail that is pretty common today in Germany. There are some barrels, empty barrels, at the end of a sharp angle, for example, located at an exit or entrance, and yeah, to pretend a crash directly to concrete. There are those barrels, and they are built in or are placed in front of the concrete to yeah, to make the crash a little bit softer, when you can call it so. And also a little detail with those exit signs and yeah, the signs that tell you 300, 200, 100 meters until exit, German signs, and also those dynamic traffic control lights. Yeah, just a little bit detail for this highway part. And you also see I already placed the road layout at this riverside near our roundabout. And that's it pretty much for this episode. I hope you all enjoyed it, and I apologize for just placing roads, but stay tuned for the next episode when we will detail our downtown and make some more builds and some nice areas. So see you in the next episode. Bye bye.